Hello, and welcome to the Floating Monastery. Rooted in history, adrift in time, home of stories and adventure and excitement, and also a place to come and to rest and to relax and to find peace. The story I'm going to tell you today is a story about a lad called Cathbad, growing up in the Hebrides. Whether it was on an island or on the land attached to the rest of Scotland doesn't really matter. But these are stories of sea and rock and tree and air and wind and all the creatures that live in them. And the story today starts off with a young Cathbad going around and visiting one of his friends, Eirik. Eirik's dad had been a Viking, a mighty, vicious Viking. But, well, there comes a time when you need to settle down. And now he was settling down and living near Cathbad's dad in a small farm. And mostly they talked of old times and old stories. Cathbad and Eirik, when they could get the chance, liked nothing better than to go and to run down by the sea and lie on the macar and watch the sky. And as they watched the sky, they saw birds. Have you ever watched the birds? There's an awful lot of them. They're wee little ones that dot around all over the place, and if you stand still long enough, then you can train them to land in your hands, and they can be your friends. There are great big ones, like the sea eagle, with wings. When they beat the air, it's almost like thunder. Well, I imagine it's a bit like that. You can't actually hear it. And then there are little birds that fly really fast, like falcons, that will glide around in the sky, looking for a small prey somewhere hiding in the grass, and then dart down whoosh, and pick it up faster than the eye can almost see. Well, they liked watching birds, and they liked telling stories. And this is the story which Eirik told Cathbad one day. And I think he'd heard it from someone called Snorri, but that might involve a bit of a time warp, so don't worry about that. The story went along the lines of, well, the Aesir in Asgard, the garden of the Aesir, the garden of the Viking gods. Well, they were a lot like humans in a lot of ways. And one of the things that people sometimes forget is that the Aesir themselves grew old. And when they felt a bit of the sore back, or the strain in an arm, or one of the many things which your dad might complain about, or your mum might complain about as well, and everybody's got their own things which tell them that they're getting old. Whenever they felt something like that, they would go to a goddess called Idun. And Idun, she had a wonderful garden as well. And there was a special tree in this garden, and on it grew apples of youth, apples of life. And if you ate one of those apples, then the grey in your hair would blend away, and the aches in your body would dissipate. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is, well, after a while, the gods in Asgard had noticed that they were starting to feel aches and pains. And then they sort of realised that, well, Idun hadn't been around at the feasts for a while. And, well, without Idun, where could they get hold of the apples? For a short while it was okay, maybe even a little bit novel for some of them. And they weren't so worried. Until Thor found that his back was aching quite a lot, and when he came back in from a fight with the giants, he needed to sit down and rest. And Sith, with the beautiful hair, Well, her beautiful hair was fine because it was made by dwarves, and dwarves know how to make good hair, and her hair would regrow. That's another story. But when she looked at her reflection in the mirror, she started to see the worry lines. And if you were married to Thor, you would have serious worry lines. Anyway, they called a meeting and they decided something had to be done. Idun had gone missing. How could they find Idun? And as well as her going missing, the whole cask, bucket, or chest, that she kept the apples in, it had gone missing as well. So they met and had a great council in Asgard. And they looked around and they talked to each other and they tried to remember where she'd last been seen. And no one could tell what was going on. No one had any ideas. Except, well, after a while people started looking at Loki. Because, well, if something was going to go wrong, it was usually Loki involved somewhere. But then on the other hand, if something needed fixed, it was usually Loki they looked to as well. And Loki looked a little bit sheepish, because he always did. And he looked shifty, because he was always up to something. But he flatly denied being involved in any of this. However, he did say that if Freya would lend him her falcon clothes, then he could manage to find out what was going on and probably manage to bring back Idun. Well, this seemed like a good idea, and Freya was happy to lend him, and Freya was happy to lend Loki her beautiful falcon outfit. It had feathers on a fine cloak, and maybe it had a mask too. Can you imagine what it would look like if you were going to dress as a falcon? The thing was, Loki had great magic, and when he dressed as a falcon, he became a falcon. And not just a falcon in his head that would fly around imaginary worlds or the 9 realms. He became a falcon in the flesh with feathers, and he could fly all around the 9 realms. He could search out Midgard, he could fly down to the depths and visit the dwarves. He could fly to Alfheim if he wanted, or he could fly to Jotunheim. And, well, that's where he flew first, because he had a pretty good idea where he could find Idun. And he had a pretty good idea of how he could bring her back as well. So he flew around for a bit, and the story doesn't actually say how long he flew around for, but then he flew back to the gods and peeled off the cloak of feathers and became Loki again, and said to them, well, I know where she is, and I can bring her back for you. But what I need you to do for me is to get lots of sticks and to build the biggest bonfire you've ever built next to the walls of Asgard, and to be ready, waiting and watching. Ready, waiting and watching with a flint and steel, so you can light us fire really quickly. Actually, no, better than that, not a flint and steel. Have a fire burning so that you can just take a bit of that fire, put it into the big fire, and as soon as the time is right, you can set fire to a big fire, and it'll be the saving of everyone. Well, that might have confused the gods, it might have surprised them a little, but he didn't really give them time to think about it, because he put back on the falcon cloak again, and he took off, and he went flying. Whoosh! And a falcon is a bird that flies fast. And he flew straight to Jotunheim this time. And he flew straight to one of the highest mountains in Jotunheim, the home of the ice giant Thasi. Now Thasi, as well, was a shapeshifter. And the reason that Loki knew to fly to find Thasi is because he'd had a run-in with Thasi earlier. And, well, as a result of that run-in with Thasi, well, she might have kind of lured Idun away from Asgard, and it might be his fault altogether that Idun was now the prisoner of Thasi. maybe. But that's something that you would have to listen to in another story, which I'll record sometime, because Cathbad and Eirik didn't talk about it this day. They were just lying there in the marsh, blethering and watching the birds. And it was the birds they were interested in. The great sea eagle circling above them with wings as large as a barn door. But back to Loki, because he'd flown to the house of Thazi, the shape-shifting, eagle-changing ice giant. And instead of going in through the front door, which would be a difficult feat, he was a bird, so he could fly in to the top of the rafters of his house. And in a room up there was sitting Idun. And Idun was sitting there with her basket of apples. And Loki took off the falcon coat again and said, "Hi, Idun, I've come to rescue you." And she looked at him a little dubiously, but, well, Idun's a trusting person. And, well, she knew Loki. And even though he was half-giant, better the half-giant you know than the full giant you're aware is downstairs and going to come up and get you very soon. So Loki said, "Right, okay, here's what I'm going to do." And he used his magic, boom, and transformed her into a hazelnut. No, all my hazelnuts have been eaten. Transformed her into a hazelnut, a really small hazelnut. And he grabbed her in his claw and he started to fly home. See, it's really good. He's got claws and wings, whereas I only got 2 hands. So I can't do the flapping and the holding the hazelnut. Can you flap? Right, so decide if you're going to be a great ice giant. Whom, whom, or a little falcon. And get ready to make the flapping of the wings. Because as soon as Loki went out of the window and started flying home, Thazi knew that something had gone wrong and ran upstairs to find out where Idun was and saw that she'd been taken, and looked out the window and saw in the distance Loki, or at least a falcon. And he knew what was going on because, well, it's Loki. Everyone knows he's going to play a trick on them, just no one knows when. So he changed into a great sea eagle and started to beat the air with his wings. Whom, whom, whom. So if you're a sea eagle, you can do that. Whom, whom. Well, Loki flapped his little wings really, really fast to try and get as far away, as fast as he could, flying back through the realms towards Asgard. Flap, 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 flap. And as he flew really fast and really high, and he went through the rainbow bridge, and it was red and yellow and pink and green, orange and purple and blue, and Thazi went whom, whom, whom in the distance behind him. And as he passed, all the trees turned to frost as he blocked out the sun from them. Look, the thing is, the eagle was big, the eagle was strong, the eagle was in it for the long run, and pushed through the air and was gaining on the little falcon. And the little falcon flapped, 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 and the big seagull came close with his great claws ready to grab it when the falcon did what falcons do best. And it pulled its wings in and it dove because Loki had seen the glimmer of the fire ready in Asgard, and he dove really fast as if he was going to catch a mouse, straight across the walls. And as he went straight across the walls, the great big sea eagle flew fast, not as fast as a falcon of course, and he dove to try and catch up with him. Loki went screaming past the gods. They got their pot of fire and they put it quickly onto the big bonfire they'd built. And the bonfire caught flames and the wind blew into it, and a great blazing gust of fire and smoke came shooting up into the air. And the ice giant, that was now an eagle, went flying straight in, and being a big giant eagle, it couldn't stop in time. And it got caught by the fire, and it got caught by the smoke, and it got shot straight up through at least 7 of the realms into the outer atmosphere until nobody knows, and, well, dissipated as steam. Meanwhile, Loki landed on the ground, let go of Idun and her basket of apples as the hazelnuts. They rolled across the green grass of Asgard. Loki turned his fall into a somersault because, yeah, well, if you're going to fall, do it with style, hey? And pulled off the falcon suit and sat down there, panting for breath, while all the gods gathered around Idun and saw that she'd got the apples, and they were able to have a bite of them and felt the youth flowing back into them. And Idun was happy because she'd been rescued. She wasn't going to have to spend any more time in an ice giant's house. And the gods were happy because the apples were back and Eden was back and everything had worked out okay. And Freya was happy because her falcon coat had come back and it wasn't even singed from the great big fire. So they all forgot about Loki, and they all forgot about how he'd helped them. And they didn't really ask too hard any questions of Eden about how she'd got abducted in the first place. And so that is how the story goes, as I have heard it, of Eden and Loki. And the story is painted in pictures on a shield, or so the poet says. Maybe if you have time and you're thinking about it, you could look at the birds and you could remember the story and you could paint the story on a shield. Or at least you could paint the key bits in it that help you remember how to tell the story. And then if you saw a bird while you were lying on the macher, you could tell a friend. Or if somebody came round to visit you, you could point to the shield and you could use it to work out where the story goes. And it won't come out the same way as I've told it. That doesn't matter. Maybe you could send your version to the floating monastery. That would be interesting. Anyway, that's the story. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Remember to stop for a while and to listen. And to think of things that might be impossible just now. Like flying like a bird. When Cathbad and Eirik lay on the beach, do you think they could have imagined hundreds of people being in the sky and flying? Probably not. But it's all the people over the years who've been the dreamers and have dreamt of being able to fly themselves with cloaks of feathers, or build machines that help them fly. It's those people who've made it possible for people in the 21st century to fly. Who knows what you could come up with as an idea? This story has been requested. Somebody got in touch with me and said they really liked the story of Idun. Could I tell it? So, here I am telling the story. If there's a story you would like me to tell, or if there's someone you've heard about from any of the span of history, then let me know. I'll have a look into it. And if it's a story that fits with my mind and the way I tell stories, I'll get around to recording it one day. And if it doesn't, then I'll thank you for the opportunity to expand my repertoire and expand the knowledge of things that I wouldn't go looking for otherwise.